Choosing how to structure your board according to your workflow is not an exact science. However, there are some best practices and recommended structures that we'll learn about in this video. Your answers to the key questions are going to help you determine which structure will be best for your workflow. The main consideration will be your answer to question number 1. Is your workflow a project or a process? Let's start with processes. To recap, we know that a process is a set of repeatable and predictable steps which multiple entities go through to reach a specific outcome. There are 2 common board structures for managing processes. The main thing to consider is how to represent the steps of the process in the board, using groups or columns. First, let's look at a board where the steps in our process are represented as columns. Each item is an entity, and each step of the process is represented by a different column. We usually use status columns, one for each step. In this structure, the data moves from left to right, meaning the entity goes through each step on the board horizontally. We use the status columns to show the outcome or status of each step as the entity passes through them. The second board is where the steps are represented as groups. Each item is an entity, and the steps of the process are represented by the groups in the board. The items or entities pass through each step by moving from group to group, from the top of the board to the bottom, or in other words, the data moves vertically. We know that Patricia's application qualification process is a process workflow, so let's apply these concepts and see what her options are. In the first structure, horizontal, the steps of her process would be represented as status columns. We'd add 4 of them to represent each stage: the phone interview, physical assessment, wellness review, and the lottery. The second structure, vertical, would be to have the steps represented as the groups. The applicants would then move from group to group as they progress through the steps unless and until they are disqualified. Horizontal structures are more commonly chosen for process workflows. That's because it allows you to track unique information at every stage, such as dates or owners. For example, in Patricia's qualification process, each of the steps is owned by someone else. If she chooses the horizontal board, she can have a people column for each stage of her process. Whereas if she chooses the vertical board, she will have to delete and switch in the new owner on a single people column each time the item moves groups. For that reason, we will build Patricia's qualification process on a horizontal board structure. Now we have covered popular board structures for processes, let's explore popular board structures for project workflows. To recap, projects are defined as a set of tasks which must be completed in order to arrive at a particular goal or outcome. The considerations when structuring project boards are different. In every project board, the items will represent the tasks in the project. The main question when building project boards are how many boards will be built to manage it. The main considerations will be the size of the projects being managed and their complexity. The first option is to have 1 board per project. Here, each project is managed in its own board with the groups usually representing the phases of the project. This structure works best where each project is medium in size and complexity. The second structure is to have multiple boards for each project. Here, 1 project is managed across multiple boards, with each board usually representing a phase in the project. This is recommended when managing 1 or very few projects where each project is large and complex. Finally, we have the option to manage all projects in a single board. Here, the groups represent each project. This works best for where there are multiple simple projects, which are smaller in size and complexity. In Patricia's case, she has 3 projects, 1 for each launch. There's probably a fair amount to do, but the projects aren't super complex. So we predict that Patricia will choose to manage each project in its own board. Now that we have reviewed the best practices for structuring both process and project workflows in boards, let's start building Patricia's qualification process board in the next video. We covered a lot in this video. If you want to dive deeper into the considerations to think about when deciding how to structure your board, check out the additional resource which is attached to this video.